right, welcome everyone to the April 20th, 2021 Board of Education Budget Work Session. I want to officially call this meeting to order, and we will begin with the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And we are just going to turn it right over to our CFO and let Shauna present this budget to us. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. What I'm going to present to you this evening is the budget priorities as we have pulled them together as senior leadership, and within discussions that I've had between Finance Committee and other individual board members. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So we're going to go through some funding assumptions, the current budget priorities, operating request, as well as our capital request, and then I'll summarize it. Right now, funding assumptions, we still do not have a state level budget for us to use for projection purposes for salaries or benefit costs. So right now we're using our a 2 to 3% statewide increase for non-certified, as well as a 5% step increase. I know the state, at the state level, they are focusing on teacher salary schedules. So on average, we're using a 5% increase that would impact the current local budget. Average increase for benefits is 8%. That's going to include your hospital insurance and your retirement costs. Again, we do not have any clear numbers, so some of the numbers that we have projected may adjust as we get more information. Right now, our focus, as you'll see as we go through this budget request, is on compensation. This slide indicates any of the local funding that we have requested for benefit or salary increases for any of our locally paid staff, as well as our classroom teacher supplements. As you all know, the state designates classroom teacher pay, and the differentiation by district is fully on the local for local supplements. We also have a proposal to look at our school nurses, psychologists, and social workers to adjust their salary supplements to be more in line and competitive with other districts. So many of the items that we request every year are part of our continuation budget. So there are items that we have to address, as I just went through, from the state level for benefits and any salary increases that are proposed on the state budget that we also have to address in our local funds, as well as addressing additional dollars for any of the unfunded items that were priorities last year, such as our compensation. We did ask for teacher supplements as well as the market salary adjustment last year, and due to local funding restrictions, we were unable to address either one of those items. Charter school enrollment is something that I do want to bring to your attention. We've talked in the past about the enrollment and the way the calculations on the local side. We do a per pupil calculation on an annual basis based on enrollments in our schools as well as the enrollment in the charter schools. When we run those calculations, there's a per pupil share that we do on a monthly basis to our charter school students or to address our charter school students. Because we've had a less of an enrollment this year than projected, we have to address that in the coming year budget. If we don't bring back those students, the portion of our budget that will go to charter schools will increase. So right now, with our current projections and projections from the charter schools, we're looking at having to increase our current budget of $9.2 million to more like $10 million to address those charter school student needs. So our budget priorities, again, we focus on sustaining operations. That's our primary focus. We have to address any of those increases that are mandated at the state level, as well as investing in our employees, which are our compensation lines. We do have a few expansion items that we want to discuss this evening, and then investing in our future, which is our capital budgets. So to sustain operations right now, due to a lot of I won't say a lot, due to some of the vacancies and attrition we've had in facilities, we have had some increases in operational supplies and some of our contracted services to continue maintaining our facilities. We've also experienced an increase in our liability and property insurance. Some of that is due to our aging out fleet. We've replaced a lot of our driver's ed vehicles and some of our other operational vehicles, and those newer vehicles, again, will cost a little bit more. School nutrition revenue, that's another item that we've talked about. Due to the fact that they are currently operating under the summer feeding program, we are able to address feeding students meals on a daily basis, but a lot of the revenue that they are experiencing a loss in is from their supplemental sales. They budget their revenue and make up some of those differences in the cost to operate their program using those revenues, as well as maintaining their staff to be able to, react when school was back in session. They were continuing to employ their staff on Fridays with no revenue. And that has really impacted their cash flow as well as their operational costs. And again, we are projecting some increases in our charter school enrollment payments. Investing in our employees, we have to address any state legislated salary increases or benefit increases first. Our district compensation study still remains to be a top priority for us, as well as addressing those supplement increases for teachers and some of our instructional support staff, nurses, psychologists, and social workers. A few of the expansion items that have been discussed are, related to the CAC diversity presentation. I know you all have some additional conversations that you're going to be having with that. So that was one of the items that we wanted to at least bring up as part of this presentation, as well as additional months of employment for our athletic directors. Currently, we pay them a supplement and they work a 10-month job. Their months of employment is 10 months. When looking at surrounding districts and other in North and South Carolina, most high school athletic directors are 12-month employees. And so we've built in to, they have a 12-month job, really and truly. So as well as a cybersecurity network position that was a result of a presentation that was done in the SBTT committee. So we've also included that. Investing in our future, our CIP projects have been through several discussions through facilities. So this will include all the projects that were identified through the facilities committee, as well as transportation vehicle replacements. We always have to take off the top our laptop leases. We have all of our administrator, third grade, and 6 through 12 units that we have to do every year, as well as additional technology in the classroom. We do have failing technology. We had a 5-year replacement plan for our refresh of our projection devices. Last year, we were unable to fund the second year, so we bringing that back to the forefront, as well as our co-curricular support for our band uniforms. So when it comes to our operational budget, I wanted to present to you where we are with our base budget, the projected funding for each one of the categories that I've just listed out and discussed. The state legislated increases as well as our compensation adjustments. I wanted to, at this point, stop if you have any questions or anything I know I've kind of gone through a lot of those slides, so if we want to do any questions. Mm-hmm. Microphone.
For the charter schools,
Yes.
has the per pupil funding changed at all? So whether they are operating in a remote setting or in person, it's still.
There's nothing in legislation that allows us to make any changes. I mean, it really is just how many students do we have, how many students do they have, and it's a straight calculation on a per pupil basis.
Okay.
So that's their share.
Gotcha.
Again, here's our charter school. Like I said, right now we have a $9.2 million budget line. I do have this increasing approximately $1 million to address any increases in local funding and to address that per pupil share. You'll see at the bottom, that would bring our current or our proposed county appropriation to $114,363,209, which is an increase over last year of $8.3 million.
Please,
Sure.
before we move on. So transportation, the district compensation study, compensation market adjustment, transportation, who does that include?
The transportation line would be, the majority of that is your mechanics and any of the office staff and other individuals in the transportation department.
Okay, is there anything in here for bus drivers?
Not at this time.
Okay,
They were not part of year 3 of the compensation. What we've brought to you all is part of that year 3, which would have been this year, but we weren't able to fund it. So we're bringing back what was included in year 3 to try to get through
okay.
the study.
So that may not go in the district compensation study, but it may be something we need to talk about as a board, whether or not we need to deal with the bus driver pay, because we are having trouble getting bus drivers, and some of it is market driven because the districts around us pay higher than we pay.
Yeah, so if that's something that you all would like us to look at and include to bring back to Finance Committee next week, that would be something we could do.
I would like you to do that.
Okay.
But
we can
just
do
to
that.
reiterate on what you just explained,
Mhm.
this was something that has been postponed 2 years because we have not had the money to do the market adjustments.
Right.
And the mechanics and the office employees are the ones that were supposed to have gotten an increase 2 years ago and were not included, and they never got it.
Right, we
Right.
weren't able
I'm
to
not-
fund it this year, so yeah.
I'm not suggesting taking this out. I'm suggesting just having a discussion about bus drivers. This
Absolutely.
This absolutely needs to stay in here for mechanic and office support.
I know you
totally agree
understand
with
it,
you.
but for the people
Okay.
watching at home
Okay.
or people
Okay,
that don't realize we're 2 years behind on our market adjustment, and we had to, put this off. I just want to be clear that, that we're trying to get back to where we were.
Right, yes.
Shauna, will these increases, when we say go to market, will we now be competitive with surrounding districts
We
and the
should,
county?
well, the county's a little harder to keep up with, but we should be more competitive with surrounding districts, yes.
And I think to further elaborate, if you look at this was on a previous slide, but on the teacher supplement, right now UCPS I think ranks 21st in the state. Based on the increase that Shauna's proposing, that would move us to, we're 19th in the state. That would move us to 10th. So
Well, it could bring us to 10.
it could bring us to 10.
If other districts that were above 19 add more to their.
If no one else does anything,
Right.
it would bring us to
But
10th.
Could get to
All
10.
of that stuff was all on our budget last year.
Yes.
That's on that slide except the COLA. But we didn't get it. So that's why it's all coming back again.
Yes.
Because this is stuff we really need in order to pay our employees market compensation.
Yes.
And I just want to remind all the board members, Mr. Sides, myself, and Mrs. Hightail went before the county commissioners last June to explain,
Yeah.
how we're losing ground. And we did put this on our budget request last year. And we were not able to get it because what I heard the commissioners say last June is, we were at the beginning stages of the pandemic, and they wanted to wait and see what kind of revenue they did or did not get this year. And after having our joint meeting and so much communication between their staff and Dr. Houlihan, it sounds like their projections and their collections have been significantly better this entire year compared to what their concerns were when they denied this request last year. So we're going to try again, and just like has already been mentioned, this would our teacher supplement is falling behind. And what I explained last June was that we were 19th in the state. We used in just 2018, we were number 12 in the state. And I suspect many districts across the state are having this exact conversation and are hoping to increase their teacher stipend. So our goal, based on today's numbers, is to move our teachers to number 10 in the state. But I'm sure a lot of boards all over North Carolina are having this conversation, and they're hoping to increase their stipends as well. So our goal is 10, to move into the
Right.
top 10. But based on what everybody else does, that may change.
So when we look at this slide and the next one with it, we have redirects of $1.5 million. And I believe that the 3.2% increase that the county told us we would have is about $3.4 million.
Correct.
So that's total of about $4.9 million that we have in increases over last year's budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we have 8.3 right now. For just so that I have this straight, the salaries and benefits under Section 3 are mandated, right? So whatever the state tells us.
Right now, these are projections. I do not have final numbers, and I will run those once we do have a budget. But
Okay.
yes, they are mandated.
So right now, that's $2.7 million just for those 3 items. And then if you looked at the facilities and operational, the insurance, and the projected loss revenue for school nutrition, all required, right,
Yes.
is another $1 million. So, and then, so that we're at $4.7 million just with those items.
Yes, a lot of what we have to increase our budget for to maintain operations is normally or historically has just been about what we've received in an increase from the county.
Right.
So it hasn't allowed us to expand much and to address some of these
That's what I
additional
was
needs.
trying to say. It doesn't allow us to do what we need to do with market adjustments and supplements and everything else that we talk about every year. I mean, the big thing this year with the $1 million for school enrollment growth is a big number for us. I agree
Yes.
with all the stuff that we need to be there. And sorry, go ahead.
I have a quick question. With the market compensation adjustment, that was based on other school districts with the salaries?
Yeah, the information that was pulled together was from other districts. And, I think when we started this process, I wasn't involved at the beginning when we initially started the market adjustment or the market analysis. I think we've seen moving forward that the county is also a pretty big competitor of ours, especially in our facilities
And
department.
State and DOT, stuff like
Yeah,
that for mechanics.
some of the
So,
things that I think, because we did do this in a phased approach, I think once we get through this, we do probably need to go back, and there might be just certain categories we need to reevaluate because we haven't seen the retention or attraction of those categories of
Mhm.
employees with what we've done so far.
I have
Agree, it's sorely needed.
Yeah.
I have a question, just because I'm not on the SPTT committee. The cybersecurity network position, can you, that's to help with,
That's a position to help with outside threats of the
Mitigate.
network, mitigate issues.
Yes.
that's the position you're talking about.
Yes.
It's really a cheap insurance policy, if you want to
Awesome.
think of it like that.
With all the people who are trying to hack into systems, it's a great thing.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Could you, I'm sorry, did you have a question? Could you go into dollars, terms, as far as the stipend goes, taking it from where it is now
For the
to what we
teachers,
propose? Yes, for the
We're-
teacher stipends.
right now, we're proposing a flat $1,000 increase.
And where is
for
it
all
now?
teachers.
I
Right
think it's
now-
graded on experience.
Yes, right now we do have a tiered structure for our supplement schedule that at one time mirrored the state salary schedule. Again, I think once we get through and address some of these specific needs, we need to go back and make a more sustainable plan to maybe do a step increase on an annual basis and fund that so that we're not coming here having such a large number to maybe keep up a little bit better.
What, on the lower end of the teacher stipend, what is the current stipend? Say for a beginning teacher, what's a local?
Believe it's like 3,500.
3,500, and we're proposing taking it to 4,500. Okay. My next question is, we are currently operating on a state budget that's what, 18, 19?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 18.
So what I'm hearing so far, of course, it's initial posturing, but the governor's office proposed budget appears to be, doesn't appear to have much support in the legislature. So I'm concerned that we're going to have at best an elongated budget process past July 1. How did you come up with this last year, the benefit increases if we didn't have a state budget? Do they still put those out even though there's
Yes.
it's not
do
budgeted?
they do include in, because they did some increases for the steps and other things for certified staff, they include those numbers in those mini bills that they've been tacking
Okay.
on the last couple of years.
Okay. So if we don't have a state budget, well, we have to submit our budget May 15th.
No later than.
There is probably about this much chance we'll have a state budget by then, because it's hard to believe it's less than a month away.
I know.
So what projections do you have to make, not having the benefit of a state budget yet,
Mhm.
that could change significantly, however you want to categorize that, if the state comes back and passes a budget? Let's say, I know they're kicking around pay increases for teachers and bonuses. If they come back and agree to a higher raise than what we're initially thinking, that would cause us to rethink this, correct? Because we have to match it for our local employees.
Well, when it comes to certified staff, for the most part, we do put any of those higher paid, and if they're, what I've read so far, a lot of the bonuses that they're proposing would be funded by the state, regardless of where the person might be funded. So
I'm talking
hopefully,
about locally funded employees having to
Right.
match the
So
state rates.
so the non-certified staff would be the biggest category. So that would be
Okay.
some of your 12-month and others that would not be included. So if they do some significant, maybe one-time payment of some sort or bonus or something like that, that might be a cause for us to come back and reevaluate some of these numbers. It just really depends. Those are going to be the category. The non-certified categories are going to be the ones that are
That you
going
have to
to
watch.
be
Are
that we'll
there
have to
any-
watch.
Are there any other potential shock waves that the legislature could send with a budget after we've already submitted ours that we'd have to readdress that you can think of?
Not that
That's significant?
not yet.
Okay.
I really,
Okay.
there's just not been a lot of information so far.
Well, you've obviously made it through this past year or so without a state budget at all, instead of these mini bills trickling through. So I have every confidence you could handle it if they finally, God forbid, do have a budget.
We'll figure it out.
So just to go back to the supplement discussion, right now, on average, CMS pays $8,800 in supplements, and on average, ours is $4,500. Just to give everybody an idea of, so it's half of what CMS is paying, just across.
You want
the
to take your mask off and say that again? That's pretty important.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
We got the
That's
packet
what-
at the joint meeting with the county, and I was just looking at Melissa's copy. CMS, it's an average, pays on average supplement for teachers at $8,800. Ours is $4,500. So just a little bit more than half of what they do right across the border.
And just to compare students to students, teachers to teachers, and districts to districts, we know that Union County Public Schools tends to come in third in the state for academics, which is a direct reflection of our teachers and our students. And number one, Chapel Hill Carborough, they're paying their teachers in more than $8,400 stipend on average. Again, about in the $8,800 range. But I always look, what's Chapel Hill Carborough doing, just because we're in the top three together. And again, they're double. Their teacher stipend is double what we're paying.
I think that it's important to know that we've lost classroom teachers to CMS, particularly veteran teachers, because, go ahead, Dr.
And other positions like psychologist and other kind of, especially EC psychologist, there was a major movement there last spring to address pay, and we lost a significant number of employees in that category.
Here's another really good comparison. I know that we talk about Johnson County a lot because we're very similar in size. And Johnson County, their teacher average is 55.63. And again, our average is 44.59. So that $1,000, if it were to be approved by the county, that would put us more in line with Johnson County and help us be a little bit more competitive.
Some of the comments I've heard in the past about increasing stipends is the thought that, well, this is the state's responsibility to pay teachers' salaries. And if they increase or provide a bonus or do something along those lines, they're doing it across the board. And plus, as I said earlier, we have to submit our budget May 15th. We most likely, I can't remember a single year where we ever had the benefit of, unless it's every other year when they've already passed their budget, exactly what's going to happen on a statewide level. So we have to work with proposing our additional stipend on a local basis to try and address our needs, because we don't know if the state will or to what extent they will address it. So it's tough because we're the first one in, mandated by law to turn our budget over to the county commissioners May 15th. The state is supposed to have a new budget in place for July 1st, but frankly, that's sometimes, like recently, doesn't happen. So we are doing what we can do locally to address the teacher and all staff pay issue without knowing, if anything, the state is going to do.
I agree. I think more and more is pushing down to the local level to take care of stuff like that. We've been seeing that for the last few years now.
Dr. Houlihan, those that hit that we took, was it strictly a financial move? In other words, if they got more money from us, would they have stayed or would they have left because they didn't like us for other reasons?
I know, to be honest with you, I don't know. But what I do know is that during exit interviews of those individual psychologists in particular, the compensation was the number one reason that was given.
Well, we've lost teachers in their last years before retirement because your retirement is based upon your last 4 years compensation. So they leave to go to, we've lost a few to that going to CMS for their last 4 years because the compensation overall is probably $10,000 a year.
Yeah, on that job category, it was about a $10,000 increase that we did not have to compete with.
So with that being said, they didn't want to leave, but to put them in a better retirement position, they would leave the job, the district that they love, to go spend the last 4 or 5 years making in another county, making more just to prepare for retirement.
Well, that's Kathy brought that up. In your case, it wasn't necessarily for that with those psychologists as far as retirement, or was it the same thing?
I believe it was along the same lines of Dr. Breedlove shaking his head. We don't have any evidence or reason to believe that it was beyond anything but compensation. This was a huge issue that we were kind of faced with and did not have a response back because we did not have that in our budget to pay that advancement.
Thank you.
I would just like the board to know one really important piece of information based on some comments that Mr. Side offered. We do hear, comments from the community and from the county from time to time that, the state's responsibility to send us the money for the teacher salaries. If that were true, if that were completely true, then 115 school districts would not have a stipend. So I believe it's a partnership. You have to have a local stipend and you have to have the state salary. If it were, if it were just a state issue, then nobody else would have a stipend. So I just want everyone to know that a local stipend is critical. And there's 115 school districts, and 115 school districts have local stipends. So local dollars matter. It is not just a state salary.
I have a question. I may have asked you this before. When it comes to teacher assistants, where does their increase come from?
Their increase, they're considered a non-certified
Right.
employee. We did their compensation adjustment last school year, so
Gotcha.
1920. So they were included as part of our salary compensation market analysis.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they do, when the state gives a 3% increase or whatever it might, whatever they may do, that they are included in that category.
Gotcha.
Just
Okay.
for Reverend Kirkpatrick's information. So 1 year it was the teacher assistants that
The
was
first
on
year?
the compensation market study. 1 year was the teacher assistants.
Facilities was the first year, the facility staff, and then the second year we did the teacher assistants. This year was to be the third year, but we pushed it to the 21-22 year for transportation and other non-certified.
And
categories.
that's all it was a 3-year study. So
Yes.
this would be the last year if we actually get to do it this year.
Yes.
And my second question, I saw in the report about the monies that's being spent for students going to charter school.
Yes.
Okay, so we're paying students, pretty much not paying them, but we're paying for them to leave our district and go to a charter school, correct?
Right. They are entitled to, if they are a resident of Union County,
Right.
they are entitled to a local portion on a per pupil basis of our county appropriation.
Okay.
So if you look at
So
it,
it's not right. It's not.
we're not, well, so the students
Yeah.
that,
paying them to go.
It
No.
just
We get-
flows
Not
through
pay-
us.
Let me
We
rephrase
so
my
you,
statement.
you
Let me
take
rephrase
the
my statement.
$100 million, let's say we get $100 million for
Right.
operating from the county. You divide it by the number of students in the county, and that's the per pupil amount. And that per pupil amount goes with to the charter, no matter where the charter is. It doesn't have to be.
It can be
Union
out of
County.
Union County.
But because they're a Union County resident, it goes with them,
And I think that's an important note.
but not capital.
It's-
just
Yeah, no
operating.
capital.
Yeah, I think that's an important note, though, and sometimes a lot of folks get confused. It's students who reside in Union County, not students who reside in UCPS. So it's the whole county as a picture, not just the school system.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's because charter schools are public schools.
Gotcha.
yes.
And so the state tax dollars and the local tax dollars have to follow the student to the charter school.
Gotcha. Okay.
The state, a real important thing to know, the state sends the state portion directly to the charter schools. But when we receive the local Union County tax dollars, we have to send that portion with that student if they choose to go to a charter school, because it too is public.
And I think right now we're paying 25 or 30 charter schools. We may have 1 or 2 students. They might be in the mount. I mean, we have students in other schools, but so yeah.
I have one quick question too. On the high school athletic directors, it says additional MOE. That should be 2 additional months, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct.
That doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Well, they're currently receiving a stipend,
Mhm.
so that supplement would go down.
It's based off their stipend. Okay.
Right. So yeah, so the supplement would go down and the months of employment would go up. And so this is just the delta between those two.
Okay.
And so that would be the 9-cluster high schools, approximately 9+ positions. So that's why the number is
Does that include
smaller.
middle school athletic
No.
directors? Just high school?
Just high school.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just
So-
want to come back to, I'm sorry, did you have something?
No,
Don't-
I,
I just wanted to come back to the stipend again, the supplement. In my personal opinion, this is the most important item we're going to have to try and get past the county this year. When you're not competitive with other districts, especially the big one to the north, it's a slow bleed. You don't overnight have everybody walk out and head up north. What happens is it's a slow thing, and then your more experienced teachers, as Ms. Heintel addressed, finish out their year. So your most experienced experienced staff heads out, and you're not competitive even for younger, less experienced staff. So it's a thing that it might be okay next year, might be okay the year after, but slowly but surely you lose that experienced staff that makes the difference. And so being competitive, it's a market driven thing. You have to be in the game, not only an excellent working environment, opportunities for advancement and growth, but you have to be competitive from a compensation standpoint. And we are behind the game, frankly. And I see that as our biggest challenge, to make the case, not only to the county officials, but to the taxpayers of Union County, how critical this is this year, next year, and following years to maintain the quality of your public school here in Union County.
so we're going to go on to capital and talk through some of those items. So as I have in the presentation, the facilities needs from the CIP that has come from the facilities committee, all the needs to be addressed by category, as well as there's 4 vehicles and transportation that they've requested to replace. We've got our laptop leases, which again is all 3 of those categories is almost off the top. Our projection refresh, bringing that back into the capital budget, and then our band uniforms and equipment. So that brings us to almost $21.5 million on our capital request. So
Which is an increase of 3 million over last year. Oh, sorry.
it's okay. So I've done a summary slide so you can see all of this on a large scale as an overall proposal of priorities, where our current adopted FY21 county appropriations, the change in that appropriations, and the proposed request for our current priorities. 3.390 is what we're projecting as our increase from the county currently, which is right at 3.2%. That has us with an additional in excess of that dollar figure of right at 7.9 million. This is the same chart that I included in our presentation with the BOCC, just so you can see those trends in local funding. And that's my full presentation. So right now, what I've heard from you all is that you all would like for me to also look at bus drivers to bring back to facilities. Are there any other items? Finance committee, all the F. Yeah. So I'll bring that next week to finance committee. Is there any other additional items that you would like for me to evaluate, look at? Anything on here you want us to go back and look at?
Some of these items, building projects on the capital budget. Is Mark Hayden in here somewhere? There he is. Costs of raw materials are just going nuts. Thank goodness we don't need too much wood we don't have wood in our buildings, but metal, everything's going crazy. Do you feel comfortable with the budget items on some of these projects you put together? Shortages? Thank God we don't need chips in the.
So as comfortable as we can be at this point in time, you mentioned lumber, but you also talked about metal. So we have seen a market increase in the pricing of fencing, which is
Fencing.
utilized as metal. That's just one item in particular. But we have traditionally done a great job, our facility staff, of projecting project budgets. I don't know how they do it sometimes, but we've done a good job, and I'm sure they've incorporated some of the projected increases, but we can't crystal ball everything.
Right. You feel comfortable. We're doing our best to try and keep up with what's happening out in the marketplace. Thank you.
The CIP out of facilities hasn't been finalized, and hopefully that will happen next Thursday. We have a facilities committee meeting, so that
Right.
will go to the full board after.
So if there's any adjustments that need to be made after finance committee and going through facilities, then I'll make those before it comes
Right,
to you
'cause
at the main
I'm
board.
noticing that our capital budget is up $3 million over last year. Some of that is putting back in the projector things back in at 1.3, but the rest is from the CIP. So we'll have to take a look at
And just
everything
to-
as well.
I agree. And just to build on what Mr. Side said, what you commented on in terms of cost of materials, Mr. Parker will tell you the same concern he has about hardware
Oh,
and
yeah.
technology, that given the pandemic this past year, that's a significant issue on devices. So we are going to be looking at federal dollars through ESSER 2 and 3 as well to see what technology allowances there are, because there may be a pretty significant need with devices that are broken or are damaged. That has been a major issue this year. So you won't see that in the local request, because we're working on other sources to help remedy that.
There's anything that can be used in ESSERs 2 and 3 that would get us to be able to use more local dollars for something else, that would be great too.
And-
Definitely.
And I've talked with a few of you about some of the ESSER guidelines and
Yeah.
some of the information that's coming out. We're getting a little bit every day. Some of it is changing, some of the guidance. We don't have full guidance yet, so we are evaluating what needs we have and what we could use those dollars for. If they're directly related to COVID or mitigating COVID, we can definitely utilize those funds for that purpose.
As hard as I'm sure it is getting answers out of the state, how we can use these funds, you're probably going to laugh at me, but I wanted to ask if you've been able to get any assistance or direction, if there's any funding in the recently passed COVID relief plan that might be applicable on our local level as well. Are the feds telling you any of that stuff can help?
Well, that's the ESSER. A lot of the districts throughout the state are using what we're calling ESSER 3. It's ESSER 3 funds for HVAC, HVAC and some of those type things. In our district, we don't have those same needs, but they are again, there was a presentation yesterday, I think at the state board. So all those policies and guidelines are coming out. It's just, we're all trying to do the same thing at the same time. So we're just trying to marry all that stuff up all at the same time.
And again, we have a deadline of May 15th, and we may if we're lucky, find out in December what we could have actually used it for.
Well, I'm hoping it won't be quite like that. We do have the application deadline for the 2 funding sources we're talking about that are COVID relief. That's
Okay.
May 7th. So we're going to be
Oh.
submitting those applications and getting that feedback. But we will be able to make adjustments if we need to as we get more information.
How quickly do you anticipate a response from those 2 applications?
We're hoping that it'll be quick. We met with the federal programs area last week just so that we could talk through some of what we're thinking about. They could share with us some information so that we wouldn't have much back and forth when we submit the application. It will be a fairly quick process to get those back because they really want to get the funds issued to us because that's how we're paying for summer school.
No,
So the summer program
Okay.
is going to be utilizing these funds. So they have,
there's a deadline.
they
Yeah.
have to get it to us so that we can
Okay.
get it out.
When you say fairly quick and use that in the context of a government, that means something different than the way I call fairly quick. It's like tomorrow. But you're saying that almost like a hard deadline of getting the summer school started.
Right,
So we
Right,
should have
so-
some direction along in there. Okay.
right, correct.
Which is quickly approaching.
Yes.
Thank you.
If there's no more question, I'd like to make a motion to send this to the Finance Committee on Tuesday to discuss some of the items that we talked about.
Second.
All those in favor?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions to Dr. Houlihan or Shauna on the budget, I will accept a
One
motion.
comment.
Oh, Dr. Houlihan.
Sorry, I just meant one comment just for Pastor Kirkpatrick and Reverend Benchen, even though I think you've been through the budget process, but next steps. So we'll take this to the Finance Committee. We'll have further discussion with the Finance Committee. And then at the May board meeting, Ms. McLam and I will present the full budget recommendation for review at the board. And then we plan to get that to the county if possible. We've always had a historic priority of getting them the budget request before the deadline. And so that's kind of the next step that we'll be taking.
That's a great point. And I would just encourage our two liaisons to feel free to, to remember to reach out to the county commissioners to see if you could sit down and maybe go through it with them to see if they have any questions or if there's anything you can explain or walk them through.
Okay, after the
Well-
Finance Committee, we should look to do that.
As part of that process, do we anticipate the opportunity to make some kind of presentation to them, or are we going to have to, or not have to, but will we just show up at their
Like we did
budget
last year.
meeting like we did last year?
I would probably assume the latter. I know that staff to staff will be working through the week leading up to the board meeting to make sure that their staff to staff is on the same page with what's coming out, and so that we can educate them on what their request is. And especially after the full board approves the budget. But I don't anticipate a formal presentation of the budget to the BOCC unless the board wants us to do that.
Well, that's regrettable in my personal opinion, because that does not allow for a give and take. We show up their meeting, we make a presentation, and then they address it another part of their meeting,
I
and
agree
we
with
don't have the ability to respond.
I agree with you, Mr. Sides. Mr. Price and I will ask them if they would be amenable to do that, to have another joint meeting.
And please come with questions, because we've had these joint meetings or presentations before. We make our presentation. There's no questions, no comments. Everybody goes their own separate way. And then we find out after the fact there was this objection or this, or why did this happen? And we don't find out about it until they're ready to vote on it. So let's make it interactive.
I will say that I think that at the last joint meeting, we had some discussion and it was good. And just to let everybody know, yesterday at their meeting, they approved the design fees for East Elementary and Forest Hills High School, just like they voted to ask staff to do it. So that's awesome. So we're moving, but I understand what you're saying, and we can ask, definitely. And Dr. Houlihan can talk to Mr. Watson about it as well.
I will also let Todd and Kathy know, according to the county's budget process calendar update, they were planning to have a May 10th work session. So but it says to be determined. So you might want to see if they're still having their work session, because if they're having a work session just like we are tonight, we'd be right there, or you'd be right there to answer questions if they had any. So May 10th.
And at that meeting that we had, that joint meeting, I specifically asked before they left that day, was there any comments or things that wasn't mentioned? And so we are seeing some movement, especially with the approval of the Forest Hills and East. So it wasn't the same kind of response as prior meeting.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.